There's some evidence that like formal decision-making processes lead to less satisfaction afterwards with the decisions. But that evidence comes from decisions like buying a new car. Will you be happy with it? We actually don't have a lot of evidence as to whether formal decision-making processes lead to better decisions for things like designs or for things like selecting subcontractors or hiring people. The formality is more about creating procedural certainty and to a certain extent procedural fairness rather than, objective goodness in those decisions.
Right. We're moving through this pretty quick. So we're already up to question 9. This one's quite a generic question. So I go if you fire it back that it's too generic, but what could an effective indicator program look like for a high risk organization, maybe in construction or process?
The argument I've always made is get away from the idea of an indicator, because very few of the decisions we want to make in safety actually need indicators. Really what we need are measures of effectiveness. So an effective indicator program requires you taking one or two of your safety activities and conducting a fair evaluation of whether those safety activities are doing what you want them to do, using measurements specific to those safety activities. Then use that information to either keep, expand, or get rid of those safety activities, and then move on and measure your next safety activities, rather than trying to measure the overall safety of your organization, which is not actually useful information.
Yeah, so maybe are we trying to maybe over-engineer some of these universal indicators, do you think, instead of just focusing on the specific stuff that we actually want to try and measure?
We know that we can't measure overall safety. Right. The explanation for this is longer than we've got time for, but I know it and you know it, and our listeners can read the papers if they want to. What we're trying to do when we make measures much more complicated is we're trying to use sort of like procedural alchemy, make them look scientific by making them more complex. Fundamentally, this is not something we can usefully measure or usefully make decisions using. So really what we're trying to do is just make ourselves seem scientific rather than trying to create useful measures.
So legitimacy, at least partially then.
Yeah, legitimacy is a big part of it.
And moving on to incidents now, what's something you'd remove forever from incident processes, and what's something you might replace it with?
I would remove the initial report containing any recommendations, and I would replace it with the report ending in a set of questions about, or hypotheses about how to improve safety in the organization. Those hypotheses, which would then feed into an entirely new activity for selecting activities.
This one's a little bit obtuse, I think, this question, how I've written it, but suppose you visit a site and you're only allowed to ask a few questions to probe whether their safety system is providing any sort of false assurance or your probative blindness concept. What are one or two of those questions you would ask to try and reveal that?
What changes have you made recently to make this site safer, and what prompted those changes? I'll go a little bit step further that I would be fairly skeptical about those answers, and I would press a little bit to make sure that they were actually changes, not things that they were going to do anyway, because that's the sign of a good assurance program, is it is actually causing you to make things safer. If it's just telling you that things are safe or telling you to do what you're going to do anyway or telling you not to take action, that's not actually doing what it's supposed to do.
Last two questions. Statistically, and I think maybe practically also, what does the change in TRIFR or LTIFR 1 month to another really mean?
This is where people get confused because they think statistical significance and practical significance are different. There are times when they are, but this isn't remotely one of those times. So statistical significance and the lack thereof means that what you're looking at is noise, nothing more, nothing less. And when I say noise, I don't mean like noise as in caused by something or caused by no. This is like literally just noise, the white noise on your radio. What you're looking at has nothing to do with any underlying physical mechanism. You're simply looking at natural background variation.
So month to month, is it that it only means noise, or is it we can't differentiate between change and noise?
I mean, noise is, the amount that is due to noise is so much larger than could possibly be seen due to the amount by signal. So yeah, effectively what you're looking at is just noise. And that's not month to month, that's year to year. Like month to month, you're dividing noise into tiny little packets of noise.
I think the natural question then from that is, do these sorts of measures have any value?
Depends on the circumstance. If you're looking at statewide automobile crashes, then yes, the number of crashes tells you something about our statewide road safety programs. If you're looking industry-wide and you have solid data and you're in an industry that has many fatalities or serious injuries, and we're talking like much bigger than say mining in Queensland, we're talking about all resource production Australia wide, then yes, those measures can be useful. But also, like, psychologically, this is what safety is for, right? Is ultimately we're trying to prevent injuries and fatalities. So they've got face value. They mean something. They're just not useful when we treat them as statistical data.
Okay, so last two questions. What do we need evidence for?
There are lots of small specific safety practices that we do in organizations that everyone has sort of an intuition that they could be of some use, but worry that they're not as useful as they could be. Inductions, online training, toolbox talks, inspections, audits, lots of activities that we spend time on. All of those activities, we could have much more solid evidence about the best ways to do them. Basically evidence-based good practice for those activities. And we don't currently have it. And it would be fairly easy to start, going practice by practice and just picking them out and working out how to make each practice better and more evidence-based.
What role do you think practitioners should play in generating a body of evidence? Do you think this should just be left to the academics, or should they be active parts of it?
I think people misunderstand the role that academics play. We're not supposed to be generating ideas. Like, ideas are free. Anyone can come up with ideas. And the people with the best ideas are probably the people doing the work. What we help with is generalized conclusions based on that work. So yeah, in principle, practitioners could themselves measure the effectiveness of their work, but typically they've only got access to like one instance and one strand of experience. And so what's helpful is partnerships where we use researchers as a way of holding a mirror back to the collective experience of practitioners rather than sort of a one-way traffic where academics are supposed to come up with ideas and practitioners sort of either accept them or reject them.
And finally, then, what research should we be doing, do you think?
Well, from one point of view, that's exactly the research we should be doing. It's just like you did for your PhD on audits. Pick a practice, investigate it thoroughly, come up with some evidence-based recommendations for how to think about the practice, some insights that help practitioners sort of go away and work at making the practice better. From another point of view, what we really need is to understand, why the hell is no one doing that already? Like, why are we so reluctant to have any sort of evidence-based cycle in safety? And I don't think it's like ignorance. I think it's because we're worried that if we do that, our practices will just sort of like start to evaporate, and then they won't do what they're actually supposed to do, which is keep everyone feeling safe and comfortable, even though the world is a pretty dangerous, scary place.
I think we need another safety culture survey. No, I'm joking. But your earlier question, your point around like new view, it's not really the right question to be asking. Would that be the same with zero harm approaches? Should we be looking at the specific activities within zero harm rather than the philosophy?
Oh, there is like a question as to whether sort of broad aspirational programs and campaigns like that are effective. And I doubt the answer to that would be specific to the phrase zero harm. It would be probably like you could label it with any two exciting sounding words. The question is like, does that sort of like big visionary campaign have an effect separate from just having the individual practices? And there are reasons to sort of like believe either direction. It's kind of accepted wisdom outside of safety that organizational campaigns are good for creating shared identity and direction. So it doesn't have to be automatically negative. But there's no particular reason within that field of research to think that any particular slogan would be better than any others.
All right. So that's all the questions I have. Are there any points you want to get off your chest before we wrap it up? I rushed you through quite a few questions.
Oh, just that I don't think that we should take any of my answers to these sorts of questions as reasons to be depressed and cynical, but as motivation that really we could have better, more satisfactory answers to all of these questions if we wanted to, if we just took a fraction of the budget we spend in doing safety that doesn't have evidence and directed that towards improving the evidence as we go.
Excellent. Really appreciate your time, Drew. Fascinating as always. Yeah, thanks for that.
It's a pleasure.